Welcome, Caroline. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ricky. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Oh my God, absolutely. Well, I'd love to jump into our first topic, extreme well-roundedness. And what I'm most curious about is how have you intentionally gone about being well-rounded from your journey across Harvard and now Columbia?
Yeah, and that's such an excellent point to start on because I always pride myself in being well-rounded. And to
Mhm.
me, in order to really be well-rounded and pursue all these different things that I love to do, I really have to be very intentional with how I craft my time, whether that's crafting it on the daily schedule or we're talking about like crafting it over months. And so, because there's limited time in the day, I care a lot about what I say yes to, and therefore needing to say no to a lot of things. I also care a lot about being true to myself at what I want to do, and that lets me pick and choose what I want to say yes to. And then at the same time, I have to say yes to a limited number of things. So that way I can keep the door open. So, like, keeping the door open is important in this intentionality to make sure that when new opportunities do come, that in my well roundedness, I see that I can pick them up and not have to push everything else off.
I love that. Wow. So beyond intentionality, I hear prioritization. And what I'm curious about is just what being well-rounded means to you and how you would define that for yourself.
Yeah. So well-roundedness to me is that like having an excitement for a lot of different things. So for me, like a little bit of my background is, I'm an earth scientist. I love working on research. I love currently looking in at wildfires in the Western United States. And that is my excitement right now. Before this, I was really excited about landslides and understanding how rainfall triggered landslides happen around the world. But then also on the side, I'm really excited about art. So I love pursuing my artistic curiosities and drawing things that represent me and my identity as like an Asian American earth scientist, as a woman in STEM. And then finally having a well-roundedness to pursue outreach, so giving back to the community, serving the community in various ways, including the Brooke Owens Fellowship. So well-roundedness is that excitement for a lot of things, but not to say that like not everyone is well-rounded. Some people really like going very in-depth and focusing on a single passion, and those people
Mhm.
develop skills and abilities that are so good, so focused, and it's amazing. And a well-rounded people, because time is limited, I acknowledge that I'm never going to get the level of depth that people who focus on a single thing will get. But at the
Mhm.
same time, well-roundedness is cool because then you have all these different skills that you can combine across these different disciplines that you've found an excitement in. So that's how I would define it.
Absolutely. And that is such an interesting, relevant, and important discussion, especially as a young professional and a graduate student. And so, what I'm really curious about is with all these pillars in your life that are almost of equal importance and relevance to you, what does an ideal week in the life of Caroline Wong look like? If everything were to go your way, how would you divvy up your time to feel like your best, well-rounded self?
Oh wow, yeah. And I feel like ideal is something that first of all I'm still reaching for, especially as a PhD student. There's so many things that occupy my time. And so I think ideally I would love to have the time during the week to explore deep into my analyses and explore the literature behind climate change, wildfires, and like vegetation in the Western US, like all these different avenues of possible research questions. While also with the well-roundedness, I would also love time outside of work to brainstorm big ideas for outreach, for getting the next generation of gender minority students into aerospace, into STEM, like what that looks like. And then finally, I want that time, even on the side, to make art pieces that channel my identity and, draw things I like, draw space, draw cats. So, and I think I would say like the ideal schedule doesn't mean that I have to be doing all these different things in a day. that's
Mm-hmm.
always really hard to achieve. And so it's really a matter of breaking up the week to make sure that there's room for everything. But also, ideally, what's so important to acknowledge is the well-roundedness to and intention to make time for friends and make time for
Mm-hmm.
family. I think that's something that I've only recently come into after graduating from Harvard. Like, now it's been 5 years, but that's something that I've grown uh, more and more realization over time of, like, realizing that there's people in your life who want to support you and that I really care deeply about and want to invest time in them too.
Yeah, wow. And what I heard from what you said is that in supporting these pillars and in dressing these pillars, that is you looking out for you. That is
Yes.
self care. And self care doesn't have to look like nothingness. It can be that action to create a logo for Asian American communities in the sciences. And
Mm-hmm.
it can be to work hard to bring other folks of varied backgrounds into these spaces. And it can be to spend a lot of your Saturday on digital artwork. And
Right.
it can look like work on the outside, but it is
Mm.
deeply caring for your insides and your soul.
Yeah.
And that in supporting those pillars, those relationships, sometimes for folks, the relationships are a pillar, but other times they are this extra additional thing we then stretch ourselves for. And so it's really, really interesting to hear how all of these things play a part in your life. And I'd love to hone in on that outreach pillar because that is also where you have so much leadership experience in. And my question is, what are ways in which you prepped before stepping into your newest leadership position? And the way I like to think of this is, are we all just expanding like little tapioca balls into our newest opportunities, or do we one day wake up and just feel like a different person? Like, is there a group of people who feel like they have a shift where suddenly they feel inspired and excited to take on something else because maybe an idea has come to them or something finally clicks where they think that they can take on that next level? Or is it this like gradual expansion into stepping into that? So I guess I'm really curious about what that felt like for you in being a part of an organization that now you get to lead as a peer leader, and ways in which you were able to prepare and continue iterating on that learning to be that peer leader.
Yeah, wow, that is a huge question, and I'm so glad that we're talking about this because it's honestly been on my mind all the time being part of the executive team for the Brooke Owens Fellowship. I think to answer the first part, what are the ways to prep for it? I think just taking on roles before this has been the prep, really. And I don't think I truly understood exactly how much work and how much investment and energy that goes into being part of the executive team. Like, like we're just talking about running a nonprofit is an incredible work, and then all of a sudden you're running it with like 4 other team members and managing a program that's expanding exponentially, getting going from getting 200 applications in the first year to all of a sudden we're getting thousands of applications. So it's I think it's there's a learning curve in having to be that tapioca ball and expanding extremely rapidly, actually, like
Absolutely.
like the boiling water has just been poured in, and all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden I'm getting all these realizations like, oh man, like I need to make decisions now. I
Mm-hmm.
need to, like, I see I think the but at the same time it's not a gradual thing. It's also like there needs to be a mindset shift, and the mindset shift for me was like realizing that I'm not taking orders as an I say orders in a nice way, taking orders as an alumni to fulfill a
Mm-hmm.
volunteering position, such as
Yeah.
I was the website editor, I was a Brookie alumni mentor. There's a set of goals when you're in an alumni position underneath the executive team. And now being the executive team, I'm like, I can see can where we can improve the fellowship. And instead of asking for permission, I'm just gonna go and do the thing.
Right.
So
And you bring back a problem to the executive team instead of asking for permission. It's you've
exactly.
stepped into your role and you bring back concerns or issues as a leader and less as someone on a task. And I love that analogy of the boiling water because that is sometimes what it feels like, where you do have those stepping stones.
Mm-hmm.
It is that, like you said, that gradual evolution until you're there and the hot water does come and there is that shift. And so
Yes.
when I was describing it to you, I was hoping that you were able to pick up what I was putting down and you did so perfectly. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, I've that's the best analogy I've heard all day. So this is really truly amazing.
I love that. Well, from what you just shared, I'm curious about what you've learned from your toughest leadership moments and decisions, and not
Mm-hmm.
just through this particular experience, but the ones in these really high performing academic environments, such as Harvard and Columbia, and
Mm-hmm.
the Brooke Owens Fellowship, where everyone is so phenomenal. Everyone is just such a superstar. They're putting their A game in, and to lead in these environments, I'm curious what has been hard about it and what are some examples of those really tough moments and how you were able to navigate that, or maybe it's unresolved, maybe you're still navigating it. So I'd love to learn more about that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the Brooke Owens Fellowship has been probably one of my biggest, most challenging leadership positions. I mean, like working with an incredible team, but also acknowledging that, with all the talent below and around me, I mean, even my class of 2017, like brookies, they're all amazing and they're all going into the industry doing amazing things. And now I'm the representative for everyone, me and Kayla Watson both. You know, there's something about then an enormous pressure to make sure everything works perfectly. And so an example is when we have the host companies, when we bring these rookies into interviews and we want them to match with host companies. And, sometimes a host company doesn't work out and it's pretty end stage in the application process. And, they're going through they think they're going to join an amazing internship with a specific company, but then that falls through. This is an example of, I think, something that has really struck me is like the ability to communicate failure when an organization is pressured to be completely perfect. And, when something happens that's really unexpected like this, I think being an effective leader in this situation is being able to communicate that, like, hey, sorry, this messed up, and then communicate the steps that we need to work through to fix that issue. And for the host company, that would be like, like, hey, we're reaching out to other host companies to make sure that we're going to give you a new match, but also being transparent about the uncertainties surrounding that, where, we don't actually know who you're going to match with, or, you know, this is like a very quick things that needs to be spun up. Like, what is the internship experience like? There's a lot of things like that as a leader I've been thinking through, and the team has been thinking through, and we want to make the best experience for the brookie because the brookie is on the line. And I think the same thing with being at Harvard or Columbia, like leading an organization, for example, like either an undergraduate organization or leading a project, like leading my research. I think the same kind of communicating failure can be applied because some things just don't work, and but not freaking out about it. Like, you can freak
Mm-hmm.
out internally. Like,
Yeah,
it's fine to freak out. It's
yeah.
totally valid to be totally like frazzled about it. But then picking yourself up and coming to weigh all the options in front of you
Mm-hmm.
and understand that we can move forward and that there is a solution. We don't know exactly what it will be, but we can get to it. I think has been really what I've grown into, to like stay calm under this pressure while also being transparent about the problems and looking for a solution in the clearest way possible.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting about that is showing your humanity in these spaces that are high performing, high achieving, and demand so much out of people. And
Right.
that in a way, so many of us are pretending because perfect doesn't exist. And so
Completely.
it really is waiting for the ball to drop. And I think what you described is so funny. It's like I'm imagining this glass ball dropping and crashing, and instead of like panicking and brushing it up quickly, you kind of just like point at it and laugh, and you draw attention to it, and you say like, I screwed up. And
Right.
that's what we do. Like humans screw up and they make mistakes, and that's part of the process. And that I think it's so interesting and important for younger folks in particularly in high school and their undergraduate degrees to hear this conversation, to look at someone like yourself who has this beautiful resume, and to
Thank you.
say that I screw up and I'm not
Oh my
perfect
gosh.
and I screw up all the time. And let's just like take a moment to stare and point and have a laugh. And in that humor, we'll find a solution, even if we don't know what it is right now.
Yes, yes. I think, and actually that's so great that you brought up that point about, failure in a resume, and it always reminds me of people who have crafted failure resumes, like just a
Mm,
resume of all their failures. And I mean, people obviously much higher level in their career than I am. And just this, and it just brings to the fact that, behind the success, there's so many failures that people have accumulated to get to those successes, and it's not a reflection on the person at all of what if you failed. It's but working hard and getting past that failure, like first pointing and laughing like haha, like whoops, that glass ball like totally shattered, but like we can clean that up,
yes,
and getting to that next step where you clean it up, that's what ultimately shines through.
absolutely. Yeah. And so, in my hope of sharing this conversation with impressionable high school students, even middle school students, what I'm really curious about is how you were able to find and refine inspiration for the long haul with these failures and oopsies. And I guess I was most curious about what you were inspired by when you first started at Harvard. And if you could paint a picture for the Caroline that was back then. And of course, I'm going to follow up with learning more about how that Caroline has evolved. But I'd love to know about the things that you kind of carried in your heart then for what you thought your Harvard experience was going to be, what you were looking forward to, and just who you were as a person then.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting to think about because it's been so long. And yeah, I think things have changed a lot. And one of the things that has changed really largely is that when I first entered Harvard, I think what I was mainly inspired by were like themes, like broad topics. So, I actually came in wanting to do biomedical engineering. Like I was like, oh, like this is the pool of knowledge that I know. I know that I love art, and I know that like engineering is cool from high school summer camps. Like I want to go and like build these things that help like skin grafts grow better, like things like that. And then with I think going back to the well-roundedness, with all my well-roundedness, I ended up at a table that was about the Earth and Planetary Science department, and they were like, "Hey, we had this major, and that got me thinking like, oh my gosh, like there I love NASA, and I've done a NASA high school internship with earth science. Like why don't I just try that?" And they also sent me on a trip to Hawaii, which was really fun. Definitely a cool bonus, but really it's like, so like the topics of like Earth and Planetary Science really were like how I found inspiration. Like, wow, the Earth is really cool. There's so many different geological processes going on in the Earth. Climate change is happening. Like, I love forests. I ended up doing a senior thesis on the Harvard forest and carbon exchange in the Harvard forest. But then like evolving out of my senior thesis, actually, like starting with my senior thesis and the internships I've done in like junior year, senior year, I've started to love and find inspiration in the people who have mentored me. So it evolved from caring about the topic, and I love earth science, I love the topics themselves, but then seeing role models in the people who have invested all this time into my own career and building me up as a student and then as a potential scientist, and whatever else I want to make my career out of. So when I look at my PhD now, I find inspiration in like my advisor. I find inspiration in the mentors who come and speak to all the Brookies in the Brooke Owens Fellowship. Then I find inspiration in my peers, and just like, obviously Ricky Roy
Oh
is
my
an
gosh.
amazing person.
Thank you.
So it's, yeah, and then like PhD, I also, inspiration is important because the PhD is a long haul and it's a long marathon. And so there's also the intention and the intentional need to to put that inspiration back in every now and then. So like when I'm going through long coding sessions in Python, or it's a drag like cleaning up data sometimes, but then
Yep.
gotta yeah, you understand. Yes. But like you have to like stop and think and remind yourself like what's the end goal, and it's that the PhD is this awesome time to do all this training, to like follow my curiosities wherever they lead me and like dive deep into them, that can't be done in like a regular job when there's deadlines and clients to goals to meet. So just like finding gratitude within that space and then reminding myself like why I'm doing a PhD is so important. And I think that goes with anything. I mean, even with a job, right? Like, why did you take on this job? Like, what was that like dream career that you wanted to get to, and like why are you in this job now? And maybe if job's like not the thing you're striving for, because obviously not everyone centers their identities around work.
Right.
That's important. That's so
Mm-hmm.
important. So
Mm-hmm.
like then with like the art is like, for my art is, why am I doing art? What do I want to communicate with art? And remembering to think about that and let that inspire me, like, oh, I really want to draw this because, I care about such and such. I mean, it could even be as simple as like, oh, I really want to draw my cat. I feel
I
inspired
love
by my
that.
cat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you for sharing. And I guess what that brings up for me as someone who is looking to get back into art, because I used to take these oil painting classes, just general art classes, and
Mm-hmm.
I was convinced I wanted to be an animator. I didn't know I didn't know that it could be at a place like Pixar, but I had always wanted to be an animator before I wanted to be an economist, before I wanted to be an aerospace engineer.
Wait, that's
But
amazing.
yeah, and as I'm looking to get back into that now, I see artists in the wider aerospace community who paint with oils. I see people from my university and just online who do digital art. And I have friends who've inspired me personally to take little watercolor booklets to the beach, to really anywhere, to parks, and to have these little solo painting dates. But
Mm-hmm.
I think I I look inside myself and I feel intimidated by pursuing oil painting and digital art, and it's me staring at my iPad and my iPad staring back at me, or it's me at Blick Art Materials staring at an easel that costs $100 something and wondering if I should purchase it and if I will use it enough. And so I guess what I'm looking for is just advice on starting, even if it's starting in a messy, poor way.
Right.
And just, I guess, I'm curious to know about how you first started and if you've
Hmm.
ever felt resistance in picking up new art forms.
Mm.
Because, again, I live alone, I've lived alone for a while. And so there's no more mimicking or getting influenced by folks, which is the best thing for me. But on the flip side, I'm no longer being influenced to maybe pursue art because I don't live with an artist, which, in some ways can be one of the easiest ways to get started. So, yeah, I'm just curious about what advice you may have for my
Yeah.
little predicament.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And yeah, art is one of those things that, I as much as I want to do art all the time, it's really hard to, be able to do art all the time. And and then actually then this might be similar to what you're thinking of where, then you want to pick up art, but then it's really hard to then feel like you want to dive into like a piece and
Mm-hmm.
you feel the pressure that you have to come out with something like finished by the end of it
Mm-hmm.
because you only have limited time, how are you going to do art and then you're not going to come out with a piece?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And actually, and speaking of the iPad, actually, I recently got an iPad for my research, but also the flip side is that I now have an iPad with an Apple Pencil that I can do art on. And
Wow, yeah.
yeah, and I I think what the barrier I'm trying to get over personally is just putting that pencil down on the paper. And at least with digital art, because no paper is being wasted, this is like my
Mm-hmm.
sustainability brain, like thinking like I can
Mm-hmm.
just draw as many pages as I want. And I think
Yeah.
dedicating your yourself to just putting one idea per page,
Mm-hmm.
it helps with that process. And then and if you accumulate enough ideas just by putting them on the page, and they can be small things, like just do like sketches, every time you think of something, just put it down immediately, and that way
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to like into some kind of art brain and like have to focus all your time and come out with a finished piece in like a single session.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, you can start your session by like thinking about opening your notebook and seeing all the pieces, the small doodles that you've created when you've come up with those ideas randomly throughout the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, yes. Okay, let's start the rapid fire then. So, my first question is, what does wellness mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great way to wrap it up. I think wellness to me is about being able to pursue your goals, right? But and pursue them in a way that's healthy, that is good for both your body and your mind. So like it kind of reminds me going back to the ideal day, being able to fit everything in your schedule, but also being able to fit in, time with friends, the things that you love to do outside, like getting good sleep, staying hydrated. Think that's all wellness. And being I think and I love the words that we use throughout, which is, just being intentional about everything that you
Mm-hmm.
do.
Yeah. Okay, what does effective leadership mean to you?
Uh-huh. Yeah, effective leadership, to dissect it into like the two parts, right? Leadership is really about like being able to lead a team or being able to lead people vertically down from you towards a goal because like the leader has the vision and then the people carry it out. But I think being effective about it is not like micromanaging people and not like being like, oh, everybody needs to like do this the exact way. I think being effective would be investing the time and energy properly to have the like build a trust in the people to carry out the vision as you see fit. And then meanwhile that leaves time for you to continue strategizing, continue orienting people to the goal. And overall the people have the trust in the leader then to like orient them, and together everyone is working and investing the time and energy together in this vision.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, I was curious about your morning and or night routines and what you do if you ever fall off track.
mm, yeah, falling off track is definitely a hard is definitely a frequent thing as a PhD student. I will say that first. But then like morning and night routines, it's always so important to have a routine because for me, it jumpstarts my day. So
Mm-hmm.
being able to wake up at a consistent hour, if I can, and go through the process of like washing my face and brushing my teeth. But while I do that, putting on either like music to liven up the day and get me like excited for the
Uh-huh.
workday, or or putting on like a podcast that is something motivational, and listening to people who are telling people about their own inspirations and their own
Mm-hmm.
dreams. Sometimes I put on the Ricky Roy podcast. And
I'm
then
honored.
yeah, it's really cool. Like, and the guests you bring on are amazing. And yeah, and then the night routine is similar where, the day is wrapping up. I sometimes will, and I know like journaling is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite journal in the way of writing out paragraphs. I more like plan my to-do list, or like,
Mm-hmm.
check off the things I've done. Like recording down what I've done during the day, I think helps a lot with aligning myself better for the next day.
Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and yeah, then making sure I get enough sleep. That's also an important part of the night routine.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll make sure that folks know how to reach you by putting your information in the show notes. I was wondering if you had anything else that you felt was lingering, or anything else that you wanted to share as part of any of the topics we discussed, or just anything in general.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered a lot. I think it's all been really good. I think for the people who are listening who are, middle school students, high school students just blossoming in their careers, I would say to remember to keep the curiosity and like keep pursuing what you want to do, and remember that things don't always work out, and it's never like the end of the world when they don't work out. Like even applying to a PhD program, it didn't take one time, it took like two times.
Mm-hmm.
And so when thinking about this whole idea of like being a leader and being well-rounded, it all comes from building on these experiences of failure, and from having people like who believed in me and who wanted me to succeed, and then reaching. And so like part of the reason why I'm driven through all of this is like inspiration by following my dreams, and knowing that people believe in me.
Mm-hmm.
And if no one believes in you, then you gotta believe in yourself. Like
Yes,
imposter syndrome
absolutely.
is real.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That is such an important message. And with that, thank you for being on, and I will chat with you later.
Thank you, Ricky. Thanks.
Bye.